Namaste to all of you, brothers and sisters. It's a great pleasure to participate in the 96th Foundation Day celebrations of Kaivalya Dham. And thanks to Suji for making me a part of it. Kaivalya Dham is an institution with which I have a long association, an association from which I have learnt a lot. Since the time is short, I will quickly go to slide share. So before I begin, it's my privilege to bring to you all the love and blessings of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo from Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch. This is my granddaughter, 8-year-old, and I had a conversation with her recently, a few days back. She showed me her hand, which was swollen due to an insect bite, and at one point there was also a blister. A few days later, I asked her how her hand was. And she said, the swelling is all gone, and where there was a blister, now there's just one small point. Then I asked her, how did it heal? How did it get all right? She said, well, I took some pills and I applied some cream. So then I asked her, apart from the pills and the cream, do you think something else helped the hand get all right? She thought a little and said, time. I said, yes, that's a good answer, because as soon as you took the pills or as soon as you applied the cream, it didn't get all right. It needed time. But during the time while it was healing, what was happening in the hand? Naturally, I didn't expect an answer. But then in simple terms, I told her that the hand had all the mechanisms for getting better. And what the pills and the cream did was to just provide a helping hand. So this is what happens because of medical science. We have learned to develop some sort of a self-distrust in normal healing mechanisms of the body. And that's why Sri Aurobindo says it should take long for self-cure to replace medicine because of the fear, self-distrust, and unnatural physical reliance on drugs, which medical science has taught to our minds and bodies and made our second nature. And this is an association between drugs and healing that we develop very early in life, and this is something which we as a society need to learn, that drugs and other things are okay, they may provide a helping hand, but the real healing mechanisms lie within. Animals don't use any of these drugs and still they get better. They also get insect bites. So it means it's not impossible to recover from a large number of illnesses without using any drugs. Now, this may look like a ridiculous question. Is a stone intelligent? Well, if we go to the creation, the creation in terms of Vedanta, we know that all creation is a manifestation of the divine, and so is this stone. And if this is another form of the divine, either the intelligence of the divine has disappeared in the stone, or is it hidden? It is hidden somewhere. Now, since it is another form of the divine, that intelligence really cannot disappear, which means the stone also has infinite intelligence packed within. And what happened in the course of evolution was that this infinite intelligence, this spark, which was there even in the stone, manifested itself, and the first major leap which we got in evolution as a result of this spark becoming visible was the appearance of life, and the next was the appearance of mind. And what actually did the spark of life do to this stone? What it did was to convert essentially a lump of clay into a machine that is self-propelled, which means without any connection of any sort, any cables or electrical connection or the internet. On its own, the mechanisms in this lump of nutrition from the surroundings, throwing waste products into the surroundings, and this went to machine, self-motivated. It not only had the capacity, it knows to move away from it. It's a self-regulating machine, which means it can regulate itself in response to changes within and outside. And if there's an injury, it is a self-healing machine. And then it is a self-perpetuating machine. It can't live forever, but then it, in a way, continues to live through its progeny. Now, just imagine what a remarkable feat of transformation there was from the stone to this single-celled organism. And what we shall focus on is self-regulation and self-healing, which are at the heart of the self-healing mechanisms of the body. Now, when it comes to the human being, again, we have the same spark of life, and that is what we call the prana, the life force. Where is it? All over, everywhere, because this manifestation of the divine, which has made itself felt now through this spark of life, circulates in every cell, in every electron of the body. And what does it do? It makes these molecules behave in an intelligent way. So this infinite intelligence, which is packed within us, doesn't show up only in the form of our capacity to think or to solve mathematical problems. It also shows up in every molecule within the body, because now this molecule is charged with that spark of life, and therefore it knows what to do, when to do, and so on and so forth. And I'll not go into the details, but we do not even know enough details, but we know that a molecule of glucose, say when we introduce into the body through the gut, it is able to engineer a whole cascade of events which makes sure that the right amount of insulin will be released and in the right amount, and will stay there for the right time, so that just to the right extent this glucose can be utilized where it has to be, and the liver for the right duration gets converted from a liver producing organ to a liver consuming organ, and so on and so forth. So there's a whole cascade of events which we do not fully understand, and that is how these molecules are in a way behaving intelligently to achieve that. And that is what this intelligence does in the body. And what can it do? A tremendous amount, including self-healing. Prana can keep us healthy through these mechanisms, and in fact we are geared for health rather than for disease. But when we do fall sick, then it is this life force which can help us recover health. That intelligence is packed in this body because of the prana with which it is charged. And not only it can do all this, it does, and that is why we are able to stay healthy and recover from illnesses. But at the same time, this infinite intelligence is not able to do its best. Why it's not able to do its best is because of lack of faith. We don't have all the faith that is required in it, and we feel that it is the outside intervention in the form of drugs, etc., that actually will make us well. And our intellect has all types of doubts based on rationality, and we have lack of patience. We don't give enough time to these mechanisms to work, and we insist on a specific outcome. In a serious illness, one cannot be very sure, even at the mental level, whether the outcome that we want, that is prolongation of life at any cost, is actually the best outcome. But that is the outcome we insist on, and that is another reason why prana cannot really do its best. So we apply a mental yardstick to a phenomenon that works at a level higher than the mind. And naturally, our mind cannot understand the logic and the intricacies of this mechanism. And since we are not able to surrender to that higher intelligence, we do not let it work properly. That becomes an obstacle. And therefore, what we need to do is to be more receptive to the divine grace, which works through this mechanism within the body. So any barrier between the surface and the source diminishes us. Now, the barrier between the surfaces are instruments, the body and the mind, and the source is the divine, with the spark of which we have in the form of the soul. And if the soul is able to establish a connection with that universal consciousness, as you know, Dr. Karandikar was saying some time back, if we are able to download from the universal consciousness, then we remove that barrier, and that's how the prana will be able to work properly. So any barrier that we have, and this barrier essentially in our own mind, any barrier between the surface and the source diminishes our capacities. So in contrast, just the opposite type of things can enable this prana, this life force, to do its best to keep us healthy and to recover from illness. And what are those conditions? The first and most important is we should be at peace. The mind should not raise all those unnecessary doubts and misgivings, and should have that peace, not only because of health reasons, but even otherwise. There are so many things which are happening in life, and to be able to deal with all those things without getting disturbed, samatvam yoga uchyate, to be able to maintain that samatvam, that which is independent of external circumstances, is what yoga enables us to do. So yoga gives us peace, which is independent of external circumstances, all the ups and downs of life. And that is one of the most important things which will clear the path, which will clear the channel for this prana to do its job properly. Apart from that, we can use our personal will and effort, which means we can, in that atmosphere of peace, use our will to say that I want to get better, and make an effort to direct the prana to the diseased part so that it will do its job well. And that is what, to some extent, lies behind techniques such as visualization and guided imagery. We're essentially directing the prana to that part of the body where the healing has to take place, and we're visualizing that healing taking place. So that is helping us get the best out of it, and that can take place only in an atmosphere, in a background of peace. Then having faith in it, not doing it just sort of, well, let me try this also, but having faith. Faith is believing in something in the absence of knowledge. Naturally, we cannot have total knowledge about exactly how this mechanism based on the universal consciousness is working. But in the absence of the total knowledge, if we still have faith, it will work. With doubts, it will not. And we should use it with total sincerity, purity, persevere, have patience because it will take time, and then surrender to the outcome. And all this creates in us an openness or receptivity to the divine influence, to the influence of this universal consciousness, and that is what will enable the prana to do its best. So in short, prana does its best when we let it, and to let it do its work the best, we have to have that atmosphere of peace. So as the mother has said, establish a greater peace and quietness in your body, and that will give you the strength to resist attacks of illness. That is what improves our immune system, which helps us in infections, which helps us in cancer, and which is closely associated with all the self-healing mechanisms. Now, how to do it? The essence is to connect the soul and the universal consciousness with the physical, emotional, and the intellectual part of the being, which means a total connection of all parts of the being with the universal consciousness or the consciousness of the divine. That means our soul, which is a spark of that universal consciousness, when it gets unified, which it joins the universal consciousness, of which it is an integral part, then it can do it. And this can be done at the level of the body. In the body, through the asanas, yoga asanas. Now the yoga asanas, when we are doing them properly, as Patanjali says, Ananta Samapatti Bhyam. Now it is only when this Ananta Samapatti Bhyam ki sthiti, when that sthiti is reached, then we also reach Prayatna Shaithilya. Now at that point, all that happens because we are trying to connect the physical with the universal consciousness. So it can be done through the body and through the physical modalities of treatment. Physical modalities, for example, even a pill. If while taking the pill, we say that, well, this pill is also a manifestation of the divine. It is the divine that has helped us discover that this might help me. And it is that force which will eventually heal me. And this pill is only a channel for conveying the influence of the divine to my body. So this is what we may call charging the pill with the divine influence, with the universal consciousness, and then swallow the pill. this pill can work. And that is how probably some of the other things which look superstitious work. For example, somebody gives you a coin and says that keep this coin close to your body all the time and you will be all right. Or hang this as a pendant in your necklace around your neck and you will be all right. Now, what the healer has done essentially is to charge that physical object with that universal consciousness. So we can establish that connection through the physical. We can also do it through the emotional part of the being. And that is what happens when we have faith, when we have adoration for the divine, and we surrender to the divine. We can also do it at the level of the intellect, when we trust this force to work and we surrender to it fully. So the surrender has to be integral at the physical, emotional, and intellectual level. And this is what yoga is about. Yoga is union. And this unification helps us get the best also in terms of health and recovery from illness. Another aspect of doing it, using this potential, is not to focus on the disease. Not only not to focus on the disease, not to focus on oneself. And naturally, this can be seen best in diseases which are essentially incurable. And has found that the people who recover completely from cancer are the ones who do not focus on the disease. They do not even focus on themselves. In fact, once they are sick with cancer, they use it as an opportunity for becoming more loving, more caring, more sharing, because they realize now I have an advance notice, I'm not going to live very long, so let me use the life in the best way for the purpose for which life is meant. So they start living the purpose of life fully, which essentially is lived through love, and love expresses itself through giving. So they become more loving, more giving, more caring, and more sharing, and forget about the disease, forget about themselves. And these are the ones who are able to use the immune mechanisms the best for eliminating the remaining cancer cells of the body, which might be there after surgery or some such modality. So they do not to focus on the disease. Then have the will to recover. The will of the patient is extremely important in contrast with the wish to die. And this again has been seen in cancer patients, that if the person wants to recover, he's more likely to recover. If he doesn't want to recover, at least he wants to stay alive till a landmark is reached, say a birthday or a child's marriage. He will stay alive till then. And then when that event is over, the person no longer has a strong will to live, and the person dies after that. So the person's will is important, and the divine, therefore, is not really totally isolated from the sincere human will, which has connected, which has established a connection with the divine. So our destiny is not an irrevocable document, and even that destiny is getting altered by using this will, human will, which has established this connection with the divine. So in other words, what is important is to align personal will with the divine will, which means that we connect with it, express our will and wish, and then still leave it to the divine. You know best. And even if my prayer is not answered the way I want it, I'll accept it equally happily. I'll accept it gladly. So leave the outcome to the divine. How to do it? So in short, what prevents from using this mechanism is basically ignorance. Ignorance of the deeper truths of existence. And what does that ignorance do? It creates a sense of separation, that I am completely distinct and separate from all the rest of the creation, and leads to the ego sense. Ego is exclusive concentration on oneself. And therefore, correspondingly, the best solution is to have that knowledge of the deeper truths of existence, which makes us realize that my separation from others is only a partial reality, and a much deeper and lasting and enduring reality is actually a oneness, and oneness breeds love, and that is what essentially leads to a full manifestation of the healing mechanisms of the body. Larry Dossey, whom you would have all heard of, several books besides this Healing Words. In Healing Words, he says, if scientists suddenly discovered a drug that was as powerful as love in creating health, it would be heralded as a medical breakthrough and marketed overnight, especially if it had as few side effects and was as inexpensive as love. And one might say that not only as few side effects, those side effects of love are all positive. So the real doctor is actually within us, and we only have to trust it. As Sri Aurobindo says, unabashed by the fear of death, canst thou leave to him not as an experiment, which means not as an experiment, let me try this also, it might as well work, not with that, but with a calm and entire faith thy ailments. Thou shalt find that in the end, he exceeds the skill of 1,000,000 doctors. Now, some frequently asked questions about what we have been talking. Will it always work? If the conditions are right, it will always work, but not necessarily the way we want it to. Because the outcome that we have in mind may not necessarily be the best in terms of the divine intelligence. Can others contribute to its efficacy? Which is, can the healer's consciousness help the patient? That also it can, because in fact, essentially, there's no breach between the healer and the patient, or for that matter, any one part of the creation and another. And therefore, the healer's mind, which is a manifestation of the same divine, can influence the patient's body, which is another manifestation of the same divine. And therefore, and the air that is separating the two also is a manifestation of the same divine. And therefore, in spite of this gap, the transmission of this influence from the healer to the patient is possible. And that is at the root of distance healing and faith healing, and at the root of all energy systems such as Reiki and pranic healing. Will others always do it? Which means, will others, those who are capable of doing it, those rishis, those sages who have developed that level of consciousness to be able to influence the body of another person, will they always do it? In fact, generally they don't. Why they don't do is because for several reasons. Firstly, prolonging life at any cost is not what life is about. Secondly, if they use it too freely, then they end up aggrandizing their own ego. And that is what they don't want, because the siddhis that they have are not for exhibiting, not for showing that they are one notch above the rest of humanity. They are not for aggrandizing the ego. As Patanjali says, in the chapter on siddhis, that the siddhis may come, but then giving them up is the last frontier. What is the siddhis which have come after so much of sadhana? If you can give that up, you can give up anything. And that is what you have to do to reach the next, that is Kaivalya. So after siddhis, the next chapter is Kaivalya, and one will get to Kaivalya only when these siddhis are given up. But in special situations, these rishis have done it, and shows that it is possible. Miracles can be done, can be performed by these rishis, even when the receptacle is not as developed as they themselves are, but all the same, the receptacle also has to be receptive and has to have that full faith and surrender to the outcome of this whole transaction. Can it work both ways? Can it help heal as well as can it also help in getting worse? Yes, it can work both ways. And let's assume that at least nobody else has that ill will and make it work the wrong way. But the person himself can sometimes make it work the wrong way. And that is why it is said that doctors should never give a prediction to the patient. You should not tell the patient that you are like that. On an average, people with your type of cancer live for 2 years. A person who believes the doctor 100% is likely to die on schedule. Whereas the patient who says, I'll prove the doctor wrong, is the one who is likely to live much longer. And in fact, it is not that if the doctor says that average patient like you lives for 2 years, the doctor is only speaking the truth, which is necessary. Even the doctor is not speaking the truth, really, because the average survival of 2 years is based on a large number of patients, some of whom lived only 6 months and some of whom lived 10 years. So how does the doctor know that this person in front of me is the one who will live only for 2 years and not 10 years? So I'll not go into how the doctor then should put it so that he's speaking the truth and yet not taking away hope from the patient. So taking hope away from the patient can actually make this very mechanism, the mind-body connection, work the wrong way. And this is what is called, instead of a placebo, the doctor then ends up administering a nocebo. Nocebo, is taking hope away, and that makes the patient worse. He may die on schedule, or even before. If he develops a great fear of death, if he has a great fear of death, he may die even before schedule. Now, this is another important question which somebody may ask. Well, now understood the whole process, but I'm not interested in growth of consciousness and spirituality and all this, but I'll just use the capacity of my mind and visualize that I'm connected to the divine and get better. Now, we can't use half of it. One can't take one part of it, prolong life no matter what and no matter how, and leave the rest of the person, leave the rest of the body and the mind untransformed, unrefined, unpurified, and say that, well, I'm not interested in any other change. I want to go on living life as I have been living. I do not want to change, purify my thoughts and feelings, but I want to get better. And now that I've understood the process, I'll be able to do it. Understanding alone will not help. So one cannot take one half of this, and because that is very tempting, and leave the rest of it undone. In fact, good health is a byproduct. Recovery from disease is only a byproduct of the process of spiritual growth. As the mother says here, there are three things: suffering. Suffering including suffering because of illness. Suffering as a means of progress. Progress here refers to spiritual progress. Suffering, in fact, has been given to us with a purpose, and the real purpose of suffering is spiritual progress. So the three things: suffering as a means of progress, the actual progress itself, that is progress, spiritual progress, which means using this suffering properly as a means of spiritual progress. The progress itself and the cure of suffering are coexistent and simultaneous. One cannot separate one from the other. Now, coming back to the beginning, a stone cannot manifest what is hidden within it. It has the infinite intelligence of the divine packed within, but it cannot manifest it. A human being has been given the capacity to manifest it, and he manifests a lot more than a stone, but normally does. And when he starts manifesting more than what he normally does, he can have uninterrupted health, and he can reject disease. He can say, well, coronavirus is all around, but I don't want it. I reject it. I have far more important things to do. I have been given a certain mission in life and an equipment, this body and mind, so that I can give something to the world. And that is more important. I don't want the disease. I can't afford to fall ill. So he can afford to reject the disease. But then along with this prayer, he can also say that, well, I don't want the disease, but then if this is going to be my end, I'll accept that gladly if the divine wants it. But not just because the coronavirus is around. Now he can reject the disease, and he can have unexpected recovery from diseases, let's say cancer, and he can also die at will. Because there will come a point where the person will realize that this body-mind complex that I have been given has reached a stage where it can no longer really serve the purpose for which it is here. It cannot grow in consciousness. This instrument has become too frail, too fragile, and it's no longer fit. And therefore, I want a new body. After all, what is death? Death is an opportunity for getting a total body transplant. Why get transplant one organ? Huh? Why not get a total body transplant, a fresh new body with fresh new organs in the next life? So death gives us that opportunity to move to the next stage. So the person can, just as he can direct the prana to the diseased part of the body, he can also direct the prana out of the body and die at will. This will be the last frontier for the person who has aligned himself with the universal consciousness. He'll be able to direct the prana within the body to the desired part. He'll be able to also able to drive it out. Now, all these things together violate the normal, ordinary laws which we have got. that this is possible, this is not possible. And anything that violates the limiting laws of a limited consciousness, and our normal mental consciousness is a limited consciousness. So anything that violates the limiting laws of a limited consciousness is a miracle. But however, conditions do apply. We have to expand the consciousness. And what is the expansion of consciousness is about? It is essentially about what Dr. Karandikar again quoted from Isha Upanishad, developing that ekatvam, a sense of oneness. That sense of oneness will lead to a sense of love, and that is what expansion of consciousness is about. And that is the one condition which I have put not in fine print, but in bold print for anybody to see. That is the condition that applies for the miracles of yoga to be experienced. And one beautiful book which will give much more about this is Veda of the Body by Dr. Alok Pandey. He's a psychiatrist by qualification. And this book has been published by Sri Aurobindo Society in Puducherry in the year 2014. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to contact me. Here's the email address, rambij@gmail.com. Thank you.